Hey everybody, it's Emily at Dark Schooling, and today I wanted to do a mid-month reading wrap-up. So something that I've struggled with probably the entire time I've been on YouTube is doing a monthly wrap-up. I feel like by the end of the month, the things I read at the beginning of the month have just like left my memory entirely, and I never get a chance to really talk about all the things that I read. So I thought something I would start doing this year is doing 2 wrap-ups. Instead of trying to do it all at once, I would do like one in the middle of the month so we can talk about all the things that I've been reading. So let's just jump in here. It is now the 17th, so it's a little bit past the middle, but we're still middle-ish. And I've read 6 books this month so far, and I've had a really great start to my reading year, so I thought let's just talk about what I've read. Let me pull out my bullet journal where I keep track of all this stuff. So as of now, I've read 6 books, and I've completed 6 of the prompts for the Build Your Library Reading Challenge. In case anyone's curious about that, I thought I would throw that in here just to keep you guys updated with where I'm at in the challenge. And of those, I only have 4 books. So 4 books, but 6 prompts. The first book I read this month was The Lost Year by Catherine Marsh. This I read as an ARC that I got through NetGalley, and I absolutely loved it. Like, what a great way to kick off the year. This is a middle grade historical fiction about a time in the Soviet Union that is referred to as Holodomor, where the communist dictatorship under Joseph Stalin basically starved out a lot of the people who were living in Ukraine. I really want to read more about this topic because it's not one that I know a lot about, and this was a great introduction to it. In this story, you're following 3 different perspectives. You're following a kid who lives in the modern day, and it's set in like 2020, right at the start of the pandemic, and he's talking to his great-grandmother, who is now living with them during the pandemic, and she's like 100 years old, and she has harbored this secret her whole life, and he starts unraveling it while he goes through her things. And so you're also following the perspective of 2 girls who were living in 1930s, I think, either 30s or 40s. I think it was 30s. You're living in 1930-ish in the Soviet Union. And so you're getting the story from these different perspectives, but it's done so well. I thought this book was fantastic. I've done a full review where I'm a lot more like coherent on history book by book, which I will link down below if you want to check out that review. So I rated The Lost Year 5 stars. The next book that I completed this month is The Brilliant Abyss, and this is by Helen Scales. This is a book I read specifically for the Build Your Library Level 9 update that I'm working on. This is nonfiction about deep sea life and the way that climate change is affecting the deep oceans and what we can do about it. And like, I really appreciate books like this that say, hey, yeah, there's a big problem, but here are some things that we could do to improve it. And obviously not all of the things are things we have power over, unfortunately, which is kind of a frustrating thing to know, but like, there are things we can do, and I think that it's really nice that that's how this book is laid out. Also, this is a book about something that I didn't really know much about, which is the deep seas. Like, I've read books about ocean life before, but this is the first time I've read one that focused specifically on the deep sea, and I just thought that was fascinating. Like, I want to know more. I think it's so weird that we live on this planet and we only know so much about the ocean. Like, why don't we know more? Why do we know more about space than we do about the ocean, which is here on the planet? I don't know. So I find it really fascinating. Also, one of the things I thought was really cool about this book, and I don't know if this will do it justice, but there is a map on the inside cover that is of the oceans. Like, the map is like what you would expect a world map to look like, except it's focused on the oceans and like the different mountain regions and trenches and all of that. It's fascinating. I don't know. I found this really interesting. If you want to know more about the oceans and you want to know more about how climate change is affecting the oceans and how that change will affect us, this is a great book to read. And I rated The Brilliant Abyss 4 stars. The next book I completed was The City Beautiful, and this is by Aiden Polidoros. This is a book Sarah had been like pressuring me to read because she had to read it, I think, a year ago for the Sybil Awards. This was nominated, and I think it was a finalist. And so I've been wanting to read this ever since, and I've had it. I bought it for her to read during Sybil's so that I would then have it, because I knew this was a book I was really interested in. This is a historical fantasy. It is super Jewish. It is set in the United States, in Chicago, during like the World's Fair in 1893. And this book is really dark. Like, I did not expect how like kind of creepy it was. I didn't really expect how like bloody it got. Like, I just thought it was really, really cool. I gave this 4 stars. It like was good, but it didn't hit the notes that I wanted it to. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So this is a story about a teenage boy who has come to America. He came on a ship with his father, and his father died in the crossing. And so he gets to America, and now he is in charge of earning enough money to pay his mother and sister's passage to come over. So he has a lot of pressure on him. He's also a devout Jew, and he is doing his best to make his way in America in a place where it's hard to not speak the language, to not understand the customs enough, to not know how to be around other people that aren't the same as you. At this time, somebody is murdering boys. They just keep disappearing, or their bodies will turn up, and so there's this whole like murder mystery happening, and it's only Jewish boys that are being killed. And so they keep passing it off as just, well, I guess another Jewish kid died. Seems to be an accident or something, and he's determined to prove that like somebody out there is murdering Jewish boys and he wants to find them. And so you're following him through this like murder mystery plot. I found this book to be interesting. I found the writing to be good. My only problem, I think, was that I struggled to connect with the characters, which I didn't expect that to be a problem. Like, I could see why somebody who is not Jewish might struggle with this, because, like I said, this is a very Jewish book. There's dibbuks in it. Like, there's this whole, like, plot with, like, a dibbuk is a, like, spirit that will attach to you after they're, like, it's kind of like the same as, like, a demon and an exorcism kind of a thing, but with Judaism, they think of it more as like somebody who's died who has unfinished business. They will attach themselves to a person to get their business taken care of, essentially. And if you don't get them exercised fast enough, they might take over your whole body, and like it's a whole thing. So that is a big aspect of the plot, but there's also just a lot of like Yiddish. There's a lot of talk about Jewish customs and things. So like I could see that being an issue for somebody not really understanding a lot of that. I found it really exciting, personally, like that I did know so much of that. But I don't know, I struggled to really feel anything when the characters were going through like emotional things. Like, I don't know. That was just a thing for me. So I gave it 4 stars instead of 5. But overall, I thought it was really good. There's, like I said, it's a very exciting story. It's very fast-paced. A lot of stuff is happening. And, like, it's very fun to read. I also really appreciated, like I said, how Jewish it was. But also that it was set in Chicago, which I don't think I've ever read a book specifically about Jews that was set in Chicago. I know one of the things the author talked about, too, in the author's note, is that, like, growing up they struggled to find books with Jewish characters where they weren't in the middle of the Holocaust or something like, and that's something I experienced too. I was an adult the first time I read a book with Jewish characters where they didn't die or they weren't in like some sort of trauma. So like there was still trauma involved in this story. Like you're not going to get away from that. But the trauma had nothing to do with the Holocaust, which was exciting. There were pogroms and a lot of anti-Semitism, but otherwise something different. I wanted something kind of light and fun after that, since it was such a dark book. So I picked up The Unfinished Corner by Danny Coleman. This is a graphic novel. It's aimed at middle grade readers, I think, but I personally think like more YA level. I think this would appeal more to like upper level of the middle grade audience, like 12, 13, 14-year-olds. I thought it was super fun. The premise of this is that in Jewish mythology, when God creates the world, there is one corner left unfinished. So Miriam is just turned 12, she's bat mitzvah, she's ready to like move into this next level of like Judaism and being an adult. And she's also an artist, and the school trip turns out to be not to DC, but to go to this unfinished corner and finish it. That's the premise of the story. This is basically a who's who and what's what in Jewish mythology. So if you are interested in learning more about Jewish mythology, this is a great starting place, because like there's stuff I've never heard of in here, which was very exciting. But like there's a lot of stuff, like Lilith is in here. Like I said, the whole concept of the unfinished corner, lots of like demons and angels and all of that. There's like a flying lion thing. There's so much going on in here that it was really cool to read. There's the Golem of Prague, which is one of my favorite things. I love golems. I'm fascinated by that whole thing. So that was really cool. I cried, like unexpectedly, did not know that was going to happen. Like there was just a lot happening in this book, and it was very fast, very exciting. Lots of fun to read. I gave this 5 stars. The next book that I completed this month was The Last Quintista. This is by Donna Barba Higuera. I read this again for the level 9 update. I loved this book. Like I bought this last year because it was a finalist in Sybil's for middle grade speculative fiction. And I knew that this was going to be good because it made it to the finals. So I thought, you know, surely this is a good book to buy. So I had it on my shelf, and I just hadn't had a chance to pick it up yet. But it's beautiful, and it has been calling to me. So when I was looking for the right book to fit in this little puzzle slot I had, like I needed a specific kind of book. And when I was looking at the synopsis of this, I was like, wait, this might be perfect, but let me just read it and see what I think. Not only was it like the absolute perfect book for what I was looking for, it was such a great story. Like this is so good. I don't even know that I can do it justice here, but let me just start by saying this is the kind of book that I think is ageless. Sometimes a book I'm like, yeah, this is good for like this age level, better for this age level. This is a book that I think adults would really enjoy. I think teenagers would really enjoy. It's labeled as middle grade, but I don't think it really is middle grade. It's not a children's book. Like it's nothing that I think that like specifically is for kids. I think this is for everyone. So this is a story that's set in the near future, where basically I think the premise is that Halley's Comet is going to hit Earth. It's too close, and if it hits us, we're going to all die. It's a pretty likely scenario that it's going to happen, and so the people on Earth are coming up with ways to save themselves, save humanity. And so there's these ships that can take people and put them to sleep for a few centuries, and when they wake up, they'll have landed on this new planet they found called Sagan, and be able to start over there. And so these people are all like families that have been selected to do this. Our main character, Petra, and her family were some of the ones who were selected. There is also a group of people called the Collective, and they are proponents of this whole like, we should start over better. And everyone should be the same. And if everyone is the same, then there will be no more famine. There will be no more war. None of the conflict that we have, because no one would need to have those conflicts because we are all completely, perfectly equal and the same. So you've got these two like factions. And this is a story about the main character Petra and her love of stories. And her grandmother is Quintista. She tells cuentos, and she's a storyteller. And she's been like telling Petra these stories her whole childhood. And so she wants to become the storyteller in this new world. And I'm not going to go further than that to like set up what really happens in this book, because I kind of feel like the less you know, the better the twists and turns will be, because this book does have some twists and turns, which again, in middle grade, I'm usually not that surprised by plot twists. Like they don't feel like plot twists, because like middle grade is typically written in a way that you see that coming, and it's not generally that shocking. Like I can't think of too many middle grade books that I've read that had like true plot twists. This one really does. This one has stuff happening that I didn't see coming, that I did not expect to happen. And I was just like, I was in here for the ride. I was riveted. And this is one of those books that I just think, like, again, this is something that I think would appeal to so many different audiences. This is sci-fi. It kind of reminds me in some ways of The Knife of Never Letting Go, the Chaos Walking trilogy, in where it's sci-fi, but it doesn't feel like sci-fi. Like, they're on a new planet, they're on a spaceship even, they're doing all this technology stuff. Like, obviously this is not current day, but it doesn't ever feel like too sci-fi. If you're not sure sci-fi is for you, this is a good start, because I feel like this would have wide appeal. I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I cannot wait to read it with my daughter. I just think it's a fabulous story. And the last book that I read this month so far is The Summer of Lost Letters by Hannah Reynolds. This book I did not expect to adore as much as I did. I thought this might be kind of fun. It sounded interesting, and I liked the premise, but I didn't expect it to be 5 stars. Like, first of all, it's a romance. Who am I? I don't know anymore, because I don't generally like romance as a plot. Like, that's not what I enjoy reading. I don't mind when a romance happens in a story, but I don't want the story to be the romance. This is borderline just romance. Like, there is a story happening, like, around that, but the majority of it is the romance between Abby and Noah. This is a story about a girl, Abby, who is 17, and her grandmother has just died. And her grandmother's always been somewhat of a mystery to her. They don't know what happened most of her life because she's never talked about it. All they know is that when she was 4, she left Nazi Germany and came to America. She was taken in by a Jewish family in New York who raised her. When she was 18 or so, she got married, she had a family. The end. That's all they really know. They don't know who that family was. They don't know about her family back in Germany. All they know is that the family in Germany died. That's literally all they have. And after her grandmother's death, they get a box of her belongings from the nursing home, and in that box are a whole bunch of letters. These letters are love letters written by a man named Edward, who they've never heard of. And so Abby has decided to spend her summer unraveling the mystery. She wants to know more about this whole mysterious love story that she's never heard of before. Who was this man? Why was she on Nantucket? Like, this whole thing that she'd never heard of before. So that's the setup. And of course she goes to Nantucket, meets the handsome Noah Barbanel, who is the grandson of Edward Barbanel, who was the man that her grandmother had this love affair with. And so the story is all about her learning about her grandmother's past and finding out who her family really is and where they came from. I just loved this. First of all, I'm fascinated whenever we get to talk about like Jewish genealogy because it's so hard to find out any of that stuff. For most of us whose families have come to America, we don't know beyond like that grandparents, great-grandparents, we might be able to go like to great-grandparents, but otherwise all of the information we could possibly know has been destroyed. Like, there isn't records for most of that because, like, we don't know what happened to them besides that they were living in Europe. So I was really intrigued by that plot. Honestly, I want a whole story about her grandmother and Edward because that stuff was fascinating to me and I wanted more of that. But I found myself really loving the relationship between Abby and Noah and like their developing love. Like that was really, it was sweet, and I was unexpectedly like really drawn into that whole plot. I just didn't see it coming, really loved it. Who am I? Should I read more romance? Like, I don't know what to do now. But this is exactly like the kind of story that I needed right now. It was very like lighthearted, and even though it's about generational trauma and finding out what happened to her grandparents, her great-grandparents, and that kind of stuff, even though there were some like sad undertones here because we are researching the Holocaust, this book never felt like sad. Mostly I was smiling throughout the entire thing, like literally big dumb smile on my face the whole time I was reading. So really, really enjoyed this. So like I said, I read 6 books so far. 4 of the 6 were 5-star reads. Like, could not have a better start to my year. So that's what I've read the first 2 weeks of January. Let me know down below what you've read so far this year. Like, what's your favorite book that you've read so far this year? I think if I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be The Last Quintista, with The Summer of Lost Letters as a close second. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more content, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading! Bye!